Hi everyone. Last class, we have been talking about extension controller. We have seen that whenever you want a standard controller with a custom logic with a class 1 to exist or survive in single environment, we cannot use the custom controller along with the standard controller. We have seen that example. If we wanted to use the custom controller along with the standard controller, then we have to go with the extension. And what is the difference between the custom controller and extension controller? Only the difference is constructor. Custom controller does not have a constructor. If you want a Visualforce page to be Apex class to be combined with the standard classes, then we have to implement the Apex class with the constructor. Then only we can use Apex class along with the standard controller, right? So we have created the Visualforce page, and we did see that like what is how the difference is, right? So let me click on preview. So this is what we have seen. Right, if I try to give here the ID, let me take the ID. Burlington, 18-digit ID. Let's copy it here. This is not the one Visualforce page. Which one we have created yesterday? This is without constructor, with constructor. What is the class that we created on that day? Anybody remember the VF page name? Write this one, extension controller. Where did we use this extension controller? What this one? This one. Company. EF underscore 2306. Right, this is the account custom logic which we have implemented. And in this extension controller, we gave the ID. So it was automatically filling up the data for the account, and for the custom logic, we were seeing what is the latest one, right? This is what we have implemented. And we use the standard save button and custom save button. Right, custom save button is which is calling the Apex method, which is my custom save, right? So this is my custom save. In my custom save, what we are doing it, we are simply inserting it. We are simply inserting. So what will happen if I try to execute? I'm already using the existing account. And if I try to enter, what will happen? It is going to throw me an error. Because the ID is already exist. Whatever I'm taking it, I'm pre-populating this one, I'm pre-populating it, right? The ID is already there. And I'm still trying to insert it, the one which is already exist. So which is wrong. So my business logic is wrong there. So what we have to cross verify here, first I need to verify whether my ACC dot, this account, whatever the account is there, I need to first cross verify if my account ID dot ID not equal to if it is not equal to null, then I do not want to go with the insert. Which one we have to go with that? That means my ID, this account is already there in the system. I just simply wanted to update it. Otherwise, just use the insert. That means if my ID equal to null, then insert ACC. Inserting the ACC. So this way what will happen, if I am trying to modify the existing one, it is first going to cross verify whether my this account ID is already exist in the system or not. Okay, if it is existed, then I can use the update. If it is IDs does not exist or null, then it is simply go ahead and insert. Let me show you that. If I'll take the existing one, so it is pre-populating the data, and if I try to change this to the banking, okay, right now Bollywood industry is education. Okay, so now I'm changing to banking, custom save. So when I click on custom save, let me refresh this. Details, so it is updated from education to banking. Perfect. Now if I try to, I'll just remove this. Okay, there is no ID at all. So what I'll do, I'll simply enter the information. Let's say that June account, phone number 12313, fax 111, and industry is energy. And now I'll click on custom save. So what will happen, it will go ahead and create the new account because the ID is does not exist. Here is a June account, right, which is created. And if you click on that, you will, there are two fields to identify when this record gets created. Please mute yourself if you do not have any questions. So there are two fields on the record. One is created by and another one is last modified by. Created by means it is going to give the when the actual record is created, which is today 6:24. This is my, it's not India time, it's a US time. So my org is in US, so that's the reason it is giving the 6:24:22. And this is last modified is today, just same time, right? So because there is no modification is done. But in case if I try to modify the website or let's say some quick list value, let me update it. Here the ownership is public. Now it will say 10:42 p.m. right? It was 10:40 and after 2 minutes again I have edited. So these two fields are going to give you the information when the record got created and when it is modified. Right? So that's how we can track the information. And by default here, we will get all the zeros. So that is perfectly fine. Now let's assume that client says that, okay, if in case user did not enter the phone number. So while entering all this information, they did not mention the phone number. When the phone number is not mentioned, I want a message on the Visualforce page. I want a message on the Visualforce page. So how can we track it? So the tracking will be, let's say that, okay, before we come to the account ID. So first thing, we have to check the account phone number, right? So it will be on top of account ID. If my ACC dot phone, my ACC dot phone equal to, if it is a null, if it is a null, assume that user has not entered the information. What I wanted to display a message. How do we display a message on the Visualforce page? We have a namespace called, which is Apex pages, because Apex pages is going to store all the information of pages, right? On the Apex page, I wanted to show a message. So what will be the exact one? We have to use the message. Apex pages dot message is the one. First, we have to initiate this. Let's say that MES. Let me initiate this Apex dot, because in Salesforce, this is a one class. The message class will be inside the Apex pages. That is a predefined one. Now I have initialized the Apex dot messages. Now inside this message, there are some parameters which are expected. There are some parameters which are expected. What we have to give inside this message, I have to give Apex pages dot, what are we going to show here? See, error we are going to show. So severity will be the dot. I need to show the error, right? Because we are going to show the error. What is the error message that I wanted to show? Let's say that phone cannot be left blank, or please enter the phone number. Let's keep it as a please enter the phone number. Perfect. Now the messages are passed. Now what I have to do? I have to fire this message dot. What is the one that I have to take right now? I'm going to add a message, right? I'm going to add a message. This one, sorry, Apex pages dot add message. We have to add messages. What is the Apex pages dot message where I have defined this? This is the one. So this I need to pass it to the Apex pages. That's it. So what will happen? This will trigger the error. Whenever the phone number is null, then it will trigger an error. What are the steps that I have done for the messaging? First step is initialization. This one is step 1. Initialize the, what we need to initialize, Apex dot pages dot message. And once we initialize it, we have to add that message. This is step 2. Add the message. What message? Apex pages dot message to the, we have to add it to the page. So these are the 2 steps. Whether it is successful or error, we have to do these 2 steps. If the phone number is perfectly fine, they have entered the perfect fine, they have entered some number there, then go ahead and first cross verify this ID. Control X and then cross verify the ID. Let's save it. Now let's assume that once I update it, I wanted to show a message. After the updating also, I wanted to show you a message. So same thing will be there, but what is the difference here? Here we are severity error, but instead of error, what we'll do? Let me put it here. This is good one, right? That means this is a confirm message. We have a confirm. Let's say that this is your account successfully created, or this is updated, right? Account is updated successfully. Account is updated successfully. Now on the insert also I can put the same thing. Format does not change. The format, the syntax, the structure does not change. Only the change will be the severity, confirm, error, whatever it is there. Those, what are the information we have in the severity? We have confirm, error, fatal, information, value, warning. These all error messages. So here, let's say that account is inserted successfully. Perfect, that's it. From the Apex side, I just have to make sure that these Apex pages are implemented and it is added to the Apex pages. Now Apex page is implemented fine. What is it here? Variable does not exist. 54. Which variable is does not exist? Let me give the different name here, message one. What is there? Should be all fine. Apex pages dot message one, new Apex message. Here I have removed the severity. Okay. So severity will be confirmed. Now for more information, let me give here which account ID is created. So how I'll get that? acc.id. And here we'll get the acc.id, the one which is updated. Let's save this. Okay. Now this Apex pages message is implemented perfectly fine. But now how can I bind this information to the Visualforce page? There is nowhere which says that, okay, Apex is throwing a message, it is adding a message, but how can I display here? How can I display here? In order to display the Apex pages messages, we have to use here Apex colon message. Apex colon messages. Control S. No need to add anything. So this will automatically track if there are any messages that are coming from Apex classes. This command is going to take care of clearly. This command is going to take care of clearly. Now let me go ahead and show you that. Okay. Now let's take ID equal to some account ID, 18-digit ID. What is that? Maybe my internet is slow. Just a second, let me check my internet. Okay, so let me add in the URL ID equal to 18-digit account ID. Okay, it is updated. Now let me update the phone number. Let's say that's 78. Custom save. See here, the message is displayed. This is not a lightning aura, so do not expect a message in style view, the way the lightning aura shows or lightning shows. Do not expect that because this is a Visualforce page, so it will be printed as simple text. Account is updated successfully. Account is updated successfully, and the account ID. This is the account ID, right? For example, if I try to create a new one, let's say that account is New York. I'll not give the phone number, fax, and the industry, agriculture, custom save. So when I click on custom save, it says that please enter the phone number. And it did not create the New York, the phone is not created. New York account is not created because there is some value is missing. Now let me enter this number and click on custom save. It says that account is inserted successfully. Now if I refresh this, see here, New York is created. So the messages will be displayed. How to display the styling part, that you have to add a styling to the Visualforce page. But messages always display on the top. The Visualforce pages always display on the top. But if you want any styling to be applied here, you can apply the style to the message, and you can put or style classes. You can implement that. Okay. So that's all about the extension controller. Any questions before I move on? The next topic is very important. Before go on to the next topic, let's go ahead and understand what is synchronous and asynchronous. What is a synchronous and asynchronous? Let's understand this. In real time, let's go back. In 10 years back or 12 years back, nobody was having the phones. Let's assume that there is no cell phone, right? There is no cell phone. So what the people used to do? People used to go to the telephone booth. We see in the airports also nowadays, we go to the telephone booth, right? So if one person is inside, then another person has to wait in the queue. They have to wait. It doesn't matter how much long the person is taking a time, it doesn't care. They doesn't care. But till this person completed, he cannot get into the telephone booth. This person has to come out of the booth. This person has to come out of the booth, then only this person can go here. and this person position will be changed to the first, and this person position will be changed to second, and this person position will be changed to third, right? So it will be in a dedication way, like one by one they have to move on. Like this person cannot come and stand here in front of the whoever is already standing it, right? He has to follow the rules and he has to stand after the last person, right? It's not only the telephone booth, tickets or 20 years back, the movie tickets or something. Wherever we go, we used to follow this line. That means till this person is coming out of the box, he cannot get into the inside of this box. And how much time this person is going to take, we don't know. He might take 10 minutes, he might take 2 minutes, he might take 20 minutes, he might take 1 hour. We don't know. But till this person is completed, he has to wait. There is no other point of going him inside, right? So what will happen? In order to avoid this kind of a situation, there are a couple of ways which we can do it. Couple of ways is restricting the timeline, 2 minutes. Once the 2 minutes is done, the phone gets automatically disconnected so that everybody gets a time. So this is a limitation. Limitation on the synchronous, right? Limitation. This is what it is called. This is a synchronous. Synchronous. That means everybody is following the rule. It's a line process. But right now, in order to make sure that everybody gets a time, the limitation is applied 2 minutes. Now everybody knows that, okay, 2 minutes is fair enough, like I can wait, right? But there are few other members who cannot even wait for the 2 minutes, who cannot wait for the 2 minutes. So it will be. So 2 minutes he cannot wait. There are few people who cannot wait the 2 minutes. In that scenario, what? There is another person who has observed that he is losing some customers because there are few members cannot even wait for 2 minutes. So what he has done implemented in multiple telephone booths. Instead of one telephone booth, he has implemented, like assume that 5 telephone booths he have implemented. So what will happen? Person can go here, go here, go here, and 5 members at a time they can go. And also there is a time deadline here. There is a time deadline for this also. But this is, let's assume that this is the 3 minutes limit. 3 minutes limit. Right? 3 minutes limit. So that what will happen immediately, whoever the person come out, the other person, whoever is waiting in this line, like anybody can go here. Anybody can go to that empty place. So what is happening here? Nobody has to wait here. Like he need not to wait for only one telephone booth. Any of out of these 5, okay, out of these 5, if any of these are empty, he can go there. That means here the process is happening asynchronously. Like multiple members can go there. If I have to tell in real time, everybody might be aware of the car driving, right? If I have a one lane, it is so difficult for the whoever is driving the car. It is so difficult for them to, because everybody has to go from here and return also should be same. One way is so difficult, and if there is any truck here, heavy truck is there here, right? Heavy truck means a lot of data is there, like 10,000, 50,000 data is there in this. If the truck is heavy loaded, the loaded vehicle will be running too slow, right? And backside, I have a car which is Volkswagen or Skoda car is there. The speed of the Volkswagen Skoda car is very high, and they cannot cross this. They cannot cross the truck because there is another way which is coming up. But if I have a 5 lanes of road, if I have a 5 lanes of road, right? 5 lanes of road, if I have it. If truck is too heavy, that can be processed here. If there is a light vehicle like a Volkswagen or two-wheeler or Skoda or any Tata Motors or anything is there, they can go in parallelly along with the truck, right? And once this person is reached, this person can cross his line and he can come to another line. Right? What is happening here? Basically, it is everything is processing asynchronously. Now, what is the definition of synchronous in technical term? In technical term, what is the synchronous services? What is the synchronous services is line processing of a data, line processing of data, which is nothing but one after one is called synchronous services. That means it will be processed one by one. By default, what will happen? If I do not mention synchronous by default, that means in Salesforce, by default, everything means all actions and jobs are synchronous. Whatever program we have done so far till today, they were all processing synchronously because nowhere we have mentioned asynchronous services. By default, system is going to take, by default, Apex is going to take them as a synchronously. Now we are clear with synchronous. Let's go with the asynchronous here. Asynchronous is basically the definition of asynchronous. Whoever is noting down the notes, please take it. Asynchronous service is nothing but processing of a data parallelly. Processing of a data parallelly with availability of resources. With availability of resources is called asynchronous. Means wherever the place is empty, the other person can cross their line. Right? If he feels that lane number 2 is empty, anybody out of these 3 can come to the lane 2 and they can go fast. So basically, we are processing the data parallelly. So which is called as a asynchronous. And in Salesforce, there are 4 types of asynchronous. 4 types of services available in asynchronous. What are the 4 types? Batch Apex, Schedule Apex, Future Apex, and Queueable Apex. Batch Apex, Schedulable Apex, Schedule Apex, Future Apex, Queueable Apex. These are 4 types of services available in asynchronously in Salesforce. So let's go ahead and see what are this. So let's understand the Batch Apex. Let's understand the Batch Apex. First of all, the first point is Batch Apex is, or batch is a asynchronous, right? This is the asynchronous execution of a Apex code. What is the meaning of Apex code? That means to process the large data, to process large data, or you can say bulk of data. Bulk of data, to process the large data or bulk of data, we use the batch Apex, and using this batch Apex, we can overcome the governor limits. And what are the properties of batch Apex? Properties are batch Apex must implement with interface for, what is the interface? That is Database.Batchable. Database.Batchable. Whenever we are implementing the batch Apex, we have to always use the Database.Batchable interface. And Database.Batchable includes three methods. What are the methods? One is a start method, execute method, finish method. These are the three methods which are included along with the Database.Batchable. And coming to governor limits for the batch class is maximum of a 250,000 batches can be processed. batches can be processed. What is the time limit for? This is within the 24 hours. That means in a day, you can send 250,000 batches you can process. Or if you have a license, for example, also it is based on your license in your org. If you have a less license, so it is kind of a license in your organization, which multiplied by 200.
Swapna?
Yeah.
Can you explain that what is meant by overcoming the governor limits?
Overcoming the governor limits are, there are few of them. Like we have a SOCL. Okay. SOCL. Let me go to the governor limits of SOCL. I already explained the SOCL governor limits.
This per transaction we can perform 100, right?
Yes. So for example, you have a 10,000 records which you wanted to update. Right? But writing the SOCL query, see, asynchronous, it is like a 200 records you can query it. But you have to update, the requirement is you have to update the 10,000 records. Right? So on 10,000 records, if you wanted to update, or 1 lakh records if you wanted to update, you cannot do with the normal Apex class. You cannot go ahead with doing the Apex class. Because Apex class, if you write 1 lakh querying, it is immediately break. SOCL corner limits are hitting it. That is the one thing. Okay. And the second one, main is SOCL thing, because there is a huge data which we are trying to update it. In interview also, they will ask a question saying that, for example, on the account object, I have a 2 lakh records are there. Okay, I wanted to update these 2 lakh records account name equal to Samskar ID. How do you do that? And what is the way that you will implement it? And once it is updated, I wanted to send an email. Once it is updated, I wanted to send an email, right? If you go with the normal Apex class, updating a record, sending an email, emails also have the governor limits. Apex email is also having the governor limits that I'll tell you later. That means you are hitting the Apex email governor limits also. So which is a too much there. And whenever you are running there in the normal Apex class, it will be queued. Like it will first update the first record, and second it will update the second record, and it will send, and third will be updated third record. So that means you are blocking entirely other people. So using the batch Apex, you can do that, and with a minimum time, because batch Apex has an asynchronous process. So I need not to block anybody. So when I say blocking is, for example, 2 members or more than 2 members open the record. Okay, they open the record. And if I'm trying to update an account record and another member is also trying to update the same record. So what will happen? So whoever is updating it, if I'll try to save this record, it will say that another person is updating this record. That means that person is blocking me. Till he completes it, I cannot do anything. There is a long process which he is doing, or long process which is done by the Apex class. Till the Apex class execution is done, I cannot edit this. So that means my Apex class is blocking all the customers, not intentionally, but behind the scene, it is blocking it for updating it. So which is a problem, right? Which is not good. So that is also another way. That's what I'm saying. Governor limits which we can overcome. There are many are there. One is a SOCL, Apex email, and synchronous process, and the execution time. So these all we can overcome with the batch. Is it clear, Ishwar?
Yes, Swapna, thank you.
So maximum of 2,50,000 batches can be processed within a day. When I say 2,50,000 batches is, do not fix this. This is a Salesforce has given. But if you have a less license, your org license into 200. Your license into organization which is by 200, multiply by 200. So calculate that way. So identify what is the license. But in the interview, if they ask any question, what is the maximum batches can be processed, simply say that 2,50,000. If they ask more questions, then come up with saying that, okay, if you have, it is also based on the license in our organization, multiply by 200. So this is the interview question can be. And each batch consists of 200 records. That means a single batch execution will be it will execute only the 200 records. Single batch executes 200 records. That means 200 records means 200 into your 2,50,000. That means it will be like 50 million, right? 50 million in a day. 50 million records in a day is going to process. And what is the batch Apex mean? Batch Apex means it's a bulk data. At a time together, it will parallelly process everything. And next, let's understand the batch Apex structure. Batch Apex structure. What are the structure is there? Like as I mentioned, there are 3 methods are there, right? So it will be like a start method. The first one will be start method. What is the start method? So the start method is called at the beginning of the batch. At the beginning of the batch. And why we use this? Why we use the start method? It is used to collect the data. Start method work is going to the database, getting the data. That's it. It doesn't do any other work. That means querying the data is done by the start method. And this also divided into batches. Divided into batches means if I have a 50,000 records, or let's assume that 10,000 records are there. Okay, it queried 10,000 records. So that means at a time 10,000 records it cannot process, right? So what it will do, it will divide into batches because each batch will be executed only 200 records. So the start method is going to divide into batches and hand over or pass the method execute. It will pass it to method execute. What is the start method work? Start method work is basically it will query the data and based on the records, based on the record size, it is going to divide the batches. Then it will process step by step into the execute method. That is the start method work. Right? If I want to delete 530 records, so how many batches do I need to run? If I have to delete 530 records.
3 batches.
Yes. So simply calculate it 530 by how many records will be processed in the each batch? 200 records will be processed, right? So let's assume that first time it will process the 200 and next time it will process the 200. What is the total count? 400. And how many are left? 130 is left. So ultimately it has to go to the next batch. So divide that way. And this is also one of the interview questions. They will not give 530 records. They will give the high count, like a 1 lakh or 10 lakh records they wanted to process. So they simply ask how many times that batch gets executed. If I have 10 lakhs records, then how many times does batch gets executed? This is one question. And what is the limitation of maximum limitation of batches can be processed within one day? In a day, how many batches can be processed? So this is another interview question. Right? I'm clear with the start method. I understood what is the start method, the work that is done by the start method. Now it pass the data to the execute method. Now coming to the execute method, what is the work that is done by execute method? Execute method. Execute method is called for each batch of records. When I say each batch of records is What are the each batch records, how it is going to get it? That are passed to the method. Which method? Execute method. And what it will do? It will do the some business logic. What are the business logic? All the business logic, everything will be in the execute method. It does some business logic and process the data. That means execute method is going to play with the data. Now, here let's divide this work. What is the work that is done by the execute method? Start method pass all the records to the execute method. The way it passes, that means if I have a 530 record, start method will not pass all 530 records to execute method. It will divide the batches. First, it will pass the 200 records. Then again, one more time it will execute. So 200 times. And one more time it is execute. So 3 times it will execute the execute method. So that means start method is going to pass the data 3 times. So they will ask sometimes for making you tricky, saying that if I have a 200 records, if I have a 200 records, then how many times execute method run? How many times it will run? This is just to confuse you. This question is just to confuse you. But remember that the execute method is going to run based on the records that are passed by the start method. How the start method is going to pass? It is first to divide the 200, 200, 200 records. And it will pass the execute method. And all the business logic, everything will be in the execute method. You cannot write either start method, you cannot write the business logic in finish method, you cannot do anywhere in the batch class. Business logic always sits in the execute method. Now coming to the last method is finish method. Finish method. What is the finish method? This method is called after all batches are processed. This method is called after all the batches are processed. What is the things we write in the finish method? Okay, my business logic, everything is done in the execute method. So why do I need a finish method? Fine, this will execute all the batches are completed. That means all the 530 records are completed, then finish method is going to execute it. But why do I need it when I have already completed? Why do we need finish method? This is because any post processing. When I say post processing is nothing but if you have any alerts or sending an email or based on the record type, if you wanted to update any related records. When I say related records, maybe in the related records you are sending another email, right? So post processing will be done in the finish method. Let's say that after completing this batch, you wanted to execute another batch. Maybe that is a batch 2. Once completed the batch 1, I wanted to execute the batch 2. So in those scenarios, we use the finish method. Finish method work is once everything is updated, the post processing finishing touch, it will be done by the finish method. Now, next one, the structure will be. Now we understood what are the methods will be there in the batch Apex class. Now let's put it in the structure wise. So how do we write it? Either you can use the public or global, right? But in real-time scenario, we use global. Mostly batch classes will be global. global class, you have to put the class name. And then you have to use the keyword called increments. Keyword called increments. Why we are using the increments? Because I'm going to use the interface database.batchable. Implements database.batchable. And inside this batchable will pass the S object. Will pass the S object. This is the starting line. This is the starting line. For normal Apex classes, how do we write it? Public class and the class name. That's it. And this is the starting structure. But when it comes to the batch class, you have to use public class, public or global class, class name, implements, database.batchable. Database.batchable is an interface. So we are trying to implement the interface within the batch class. So whenever we are trying to call the interface, we have to always use the implements. And we did learn that in the interface when we were discussing the interface topic. Okay. Now, inside this, what are we discussed? There are three methods. Let's put the three methods. Start method, execute method, finish method. Right? These are the three methods. Definitely, there will be a curly braces because we have to write some logic. Now, this is the structure. Now, whenever we are using the global in the class, what we have to use? We have to always use the global here. Global, because access modifier is global. This is also global. And if we are implementing a method, what we use? Void we use. Access modifier, void, method name. Void, method name. Right? But coming to start method, you cannot use the void. You cannot use the void. The reason is start method work is querying the data. Querying the data from the database and passing to the execute method. That is the work that is done by the start method. So what is the thing that I have to use instead of void? We have an interface which says that database.query locator. Database.query locator. Always use the database.query locator. Instead of a void, use the database.query locator. For other execute and finish method, it will be void. Now, next point is on top, we are implementing the interface database.batchable, right? So that means these start, execute, finish methods are part of the database.batchable. In that case, every method, whether it is a start method or execute method or finish method, will have the parameter called database.batchable context. Parameter is batchable context. And let's give the name to this. Database.batchable. You can give any name, that should be fine. Fine. First parameter, whether it is a start or execute or finish method, always database.batchable context BC, or you can give any name, but database.batchable context should be there. Why we need, what is the purpose of this? Because What is the purpose of this? If you go to the normal class, okay, if I go to the normal Apex class, let's assume that if I have to call this calculate method from the any of the Apex class. So what I'll do, I'll simply call this method from another method, right? Or if I wanted to pass any data, I can pass it in L comma. I'll pass in case if it is expecting any parameter. So what I'll do, method name, and I'll pass the parameter. Then only this method gets executed, right? If I do not call this from this method, this will not be executed. But coming to batch class, I need not to do this in the start method. That means I need not to call the execute method from the start method. I cannot need it. This is not required. Even I cannot call this. It's not required to call the finish method inside the execute method. Not needed. Not required this. Why it is not required? So how the start, what are the query date? How the execute method is going to capture the information from the start method? It's all sits into the database.batchable context. Behind the scene, database.batchable context is going to play a major role. What is the start method is returning it. It will capture that and it will pass it to execute method. Once this is done, it will pass it to finish method. So the work is done by the database.batchable context. As a developer, you cannot see that, but behind the scene, Salesforce or whoever is implemented, the behind the scene, this interface is going to play a role to pass the records from the start method to execute. Once the execute method is done, passing the data to the finish method. So that's the reason we need a database.batchable context, right? And here, what are the records are passed? Okay, for example, it is taking start method is querying the records. Let's assume that it is querying the account records. Okay, whenever it has to pass, it is passing the data, but it needs to have another parameter which data it is passing. Could be a single S object, could be a list of object, could be an integer, could be a string, right? Start method can be pass anything, count of the records. It can pass only the account names, or it can pass list of the account records. But ultimately it has to pass the record data. But which way it is passing, we do not know. So that's the reason we have to always use the parameter. Whatever the expected output is there, if it is passing a list of records, then we have to use list of S object. You can give any name records. Instead of S object, if you want to specify the custom object, you can specify the custom object or standard object like the account. You can specify list of account records because that is expected from the start method. But if you think that there is a custom object record data will be passed, then you can use the custom object API name patient __ C and the records because this is what expected from the start method. Only execute method is required two parameters. One is database.batchable context and second one is what are the records that are passed by the start method. We have to use the same naming convention, same thing. If it is a passing the count of records, then I have to take the count of records. Or if it is passing only the account names, list of account names it is passing, then I can take list of string. Right? So only that is required. This is the exact structure. Trust me, everybody feels that batch class is so difficult, but it's not at all difficult. Only thing you have to remember is the batch class uses the database.batchable. Batch class uses the database.batchable and in three methods, I have to refer the batchable context. The skeleton structure is so easy. Let me go ahead and implement this so that you will understand. So let me close all of this. File new Apex class. Okay. Right now I'm taking the public, but in real time we always take the, sorry, this is the class name. So CL underscore 2506. Let's keep the, we are doing the batch class, right? Batch Apex example 1. Okay. So this is how the structure will come. Whenever we create Apex class, this is the structure. Outer structure will be like this, right? But what we need to change? We need to change public. This is everything is fine. What is the additional thing we have to use? Implements. What do we need to implement? Implement database dot batchable context. So batchable, and inside this we have to use the S object. S object. Now, as soon as I implement it, it immediately says that you are missing 3 methods. You are missing 3 methods. See here, it is always suggesting you database.batchable context, database.batchable context, come on list, and finish method, start, execute, finish method. And it is giving you the format, how it should be there, right? So as soon as I implement database.batchable as object, it is giving me the error saying that you do not have a methods. Which methods I do not have? Start, execute, finish method you do not have. So it is asking me to implement. So let's go ahead and implement public. So for the start method, we always have to use the query locator. So it will be database dot query locator. You can use either one, query locator iterator, query locator chunk iterator. These are because, like, if you want to look through the records, anything, you can use that. But right now, let's use the query locator. Now, this is the method inside the database. And then what we need a start method. And inside the start method, what is the parameter that is required? Database.Batchable context. And let's give the name to this. Now my start method is done. Now it is going to throw me an error for the 2 other methods. See, execute and finish. Execute and finish. For the execute, public void execute. And what are the parameters that I need? Database.batchable context. Right, and let's take, we do not know the object right now, so that's the reason I'm taking the list of S object. Could be any object, standard object or custom object, could be anything. Right, so let me take this as a OBJ. So my execute method is done. Perfect. Now it is going to throw me an error for the finish method. Right. So now let's go ahead and execute the finish method, write the finish method. Public void finish. What is the parameter is required? Parameter is database.batchable context. Okay. Now my structure is done. I can save this. Database.query locator missing the return type. Yes, because it is expecting the start method always has the return type. Now, for that, let me execute the query first. We have to write the SOQL query. Inside the start method, we have to write the SOQL query. So let's take an example of the object. I have a patient object. Okay, I have a patient's object. Inside this patient's object, I have 11 records. Okay, so let me query this patient's object. So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to write the straightforward SQL query. I'm going to write the dynamic query. This is the dynamic query. What is a straightforward SQL query? Straightforward SQL query is select ID, comma, whatever name, from patients. If you write same thing here, list of patients. This is straightforward. You are directly running the query. There is nothing is there. But instead of writing the direct query, what we can do is we always use the dynamic query in the start method. So first you have to define the string. String query equal to, we are writing the query. This will be in the text format. Select ID, comma, what are the values that I need? Let's take name, comma, patient last name. And what are the details that I have? I have patient email. Okay. If you look at the patient record, I have 10 records which says that we want to P10, but there is a one record which says patient details. So when I'm running the query, I wanted to exclude this. Okay, we can do that later, but right now, let's execute everything. So total 11 records are there, right? If I try to execute this query, it says that 11 records are there. Perfect. Now we are putting everything in the string. Now here, first, how do we convert query string to the query locator? So we have inside the database dot. Inside this, we have a query locator, get query locator. Here it is, get query locator string query. Database.query locator database. So inside this, we have to pass the query. And same data, I wanted to return it from the start method. Perfect. Clear till this point, any questions? Let's save this. On the start method, any questions? Or till now, whatever we have discussed, any questions on that?
No, sir, no.
So let's go ahead. Now I'm querying the data. Okay. Now inside the execute method, now I'm clear what is the data that is coming here. It is coming the patient object data. So instead of S object, what I can do is I can use the patient object. And I can give the, that's fine, OPG parameter is fine. Patient's records are passed to the execute method. Now, what is my requirement? The requirement says that all the last name should be updated with the batch Apex. First name should be P1, but last name should be updated as a batch Apex. Let's assume that that is the requirement. So how do you do? First, we are getting all the records here, right? Ruchi, any questions? Now I have to go through each one by one because I need to update the last name to the batch Apex. So ideally, how we write it? I'll take this. If I have a one record patient, PIENT equal to new patient. So what I'll do, so if I have to update it, then what we will do, we will take the patient name dot last name equal to batch apex. But here, what I'm doing, I'm initializing it. I'm initializing the object. That means it thinks that I'm going to create a new record. But that is not the requirement. I have to update the existing one. If I have to update the existing one, then I have to take the reference of this OBG, right? So for that, what I'll do for my object patient underscore underscore C in the OBG. I am querying the records that are passed from the start method. Now what I'll do, I'll simply do that P dot last name, last murder, last refuse, patient last name equal to batch apex. I'm updating the last name equal to batch apex. This is fine. Okay. Now let me delete this. If I do the update inside the for loop, if I update the patient name inside the for loop, what is the issue that I'm going to face? I'll hit the Garner limits, right? I'll hit the Garner limits. The reason is, yes, anybody is saying something? Okay, so inside the for loop, DML update is not a good practice. DML update inside the loop is not a good practice. We should not do DML inside the for loop. First thing, you are going to hit the Garner limits. Because right now we have 11 record, that should be fine updating inside the for loop. But as a developer, we should not do inside the for loop. So what we can do is I can declare list of patient. I can initialize the list here. Let's say that this is the patients. Giving the name as patient list. Okay. Now these, whatever we are updating inside this, what I can do is patients dot add. Now come out of the for loop. Once you came out of the for loop, check whether your patients dot is empty. If it is not empty, that means there is some records which are already, the name is updated, name is changed, and it is added to the patient record. If your patients has a records, that means it is not empty. Then what you can do, simply go ahead and update patients. So what it will do, all the 11 patients, it is going to update together. Perfect. Okay. Any error? Control S. Now, what is the logic here? It is written, I'm querying the patient's record, passing to the execute method. How I'm passing, I'm not calling this execute method here, but how it is passed using the database.batchable context behind the scene, this will take care. And once it receives the OBJ records, it will look through all the records and it will add the patient last name equal to batch apex, and we are adding to the list. And this list will be updated once all the records are added as a batch apex is added. Once it is, everything is done, then the DML operation happens when it is out of the for. Now let me go ahead and execute this. How to execute the batch apex? Same thing, we have to initialize it. Take this batch class, initialize the class. Let's say that this is the BA equal to new batch class. Now, initialization is fine, but how to run this? I cannot run BA dot start method, BA dot execute method, BA dot finish method. I cannot do that. In order to execute this, we need a help of database. We need a help of database because this batch class implements the interface. So with the help of database dot, we have a execute.
कम हुई है ना
Questions, Ruchi? Okay. Database dot, this is the interface, or you can say that namespace, think as a namespace. Okay, this interface namespace, I need a help of executing the batch class. That means database dot execute batch. What is the batch that I'm executing it? This is the batch because I gave the name as BA. Now let me go ahead and execute this. Highlight, execute the highlighted one. Perfect, no error. Let me go ahead and go to the patients. Where it is not giving me anything. So what I'll do is I'll run a query. This has the last name, right? Executed. See, all the patient last name has a batch X. Right? So here it is not giving me here. If I try to do all, let's see. Click on all. Okay. So let me add the field to display. Last name, patient last name. Okay. See here. All the batch effects it is updated. So all the business logic, what are the business logic is there? Where we have written the business logic, we have written the business logic inside the execute method. We did not do anything finish method. Okay, Swapna, so I have a question. If you do not do anything in the finish method, so why do I need it? Can I remove this? Can I remove this? No, you cannot. Because that is a standard structure expected by the interface database. Data, if you are implementing a database.batchable, it is expecting this class to have a 3 methods. Though you have some logic post-processing or not, it doesn't matter, but you have to define the skeleton structure of the finish method. Skeleton structure of the finish method. So far, is it clear? And in the finish method, what we do? We do send an email, or if you have a alerts, or SMS, or anything that, or if you wanted to call a new batch class, this logic we will do into the finish method. Anybody has any questions before I move on?
Swapna, you are saying that in the finish method we can call another batch class, right?
Yeah, in some scenarios.
Can you tell me the basic syntax for that?
Basic syntax is same. See, as you are running the batch class here, from the anonymous, you are running the batch class, right? If you want to run this batch, you can call same format here. Execution of the batch is nothing but database.execute. Let's assume that there is a ext2. You can call the batch. Calling the batch will be only 2 lines. First, you have to initialize it. Using the interface, you have to execute the batch. Clear? So That will be straightforward. Wherever you are executing the batch, you have to initialize it. Whether it is a schedulable class or in a different class you wanted to call or somewhere you wanted to call, the main thing is only two steps. You have to initialize it using the database interface. You have to execute it. That's it. There is no other logic here. But in case this batch is executing, expecting some parameters, in that case, you have to write a logic. And one more thing, whenever you are executing here, let me show you one more thing. Database dot execute. There are two execute methods are there. One is straightforward, the batch you have to give, and second one you have to give the batch size. You have to give the batch size. If you wanted to execute everything in one batch, instead of dividing the batch, you can give one. Or if you wanted to, by default, it is going to divide it based on the number of records. But if you want everything should be running in the single batch, then you can give the count. Or if you have 100 records or 10 records are there, but I want 10 records to be executed in 2 batches, give the number 2 batch here, number 2. Fine. Now let's go ahead and see how to send the email. How to send an email. So before I write here, first let me explain the exact what are the things we have to do in the Apex email. Send email. So let's create a new class. CL underscore. Today's date 25/06. 25/06. What we are doing? We are writing the Apex email, right? So which is a send email. Send EL, example 1. So what are the steps that we have to do in order to send an email from the Apex class? In batch class also we have to do. So we'll come this point later, sending an email. But before that, let's understand what are the things that we have to do in order to send an email. Okay, so this is the class. Inside the class, let's go ahead and declare a method, public void. Let's say the method name is sending. Send email from Apex. Fine. And in send email, let me expect some parameters here. The parameters will be the to address and subject. Instead of passing the parameters, we can also hard code it, but it's better to pass the parameter string, the body. Fine. Now, so what are the things that I need? First thing, step 1. We have to call the messaging namespace. There is a namespace called messaging. There is a namespace called messaging. We have to call the namespace messaging. How to call the namespace messaging? Messaging dot, that is the namespace. And inside the messaging, we have a different methods are there. And for us, we need to send a single email message. Let's use the single email. So where is the single email message? Here, single email message. Let's initialize this m1 equal to. I have to use the new keyword here. Okay. Now calling that messaging namespace inside that method single email message is done. Because right now we are working on sending a single email. Okay. Now, what is the second step? Second step, you have to put the to address or CC address in the list data type. Add the address in list data type. Or you can say collection data type. How to add the address to the list data type, we have to declare the list string. The address will be, the data type is string, right? So that's the reason I have used the string of, let's say that email to address equal to new list of string. Now inside this new list, what I need to pass? I need to pass the data. So let's assume that to address. I have a to address that I'm getting from the method. So I'll pass the to address. So if you want to pass multiple addresses here, single email I wanted to send, but to the multiple people, you can do it. To address comma, you can add whoever you want, but it has to be in the quotation. Let's say that Samskar IT @gmail.com, right? So you can put as many as email address in the to address. That should be fine. Right now I'm taking out. Okay. So that is the to address. And we can also add the CC address if you wanted to copy somebody else. How can you do that? Same thing you have to do it. But this name will be CC address. You can add a different names, and then here also you can add multiple names, but it has to be, if you are hard coding it, it has to be in the quotation. If you are passing here string, you can add those values here. And this will be not to address. Let's put the to address only in CC also if you want. Now the second step is done, adding the address into the list. Now we have a subject and body. Step 3. Guys, please mute yourself if you do not have any questions. Step 3. What is this final thing? This is a compose the email. How do I compose it? Where do I compose it? We have initialized here messaging dot single email message. So take that m1 dot. What are the things that we have to set? First, I have to set the to address. I have to set to address. Right, so these all expect a list. Okay, you cannot declare a single. If you have a one email ID, can I go with simple declaring the string instead of list? No, you cannot do, because this namespace messaging single email message, whatever is there, this method, this class is always accept the list data type. So if you have a one email address or two email address, first set it up into the list. Right, and then we will set the m1.cc set cc address. Set cc address. Email underscore cc address. Okay. Now, main thing is subject. m1 dot set subject. What is the subject that I wanted to get? Whatever I am passing here is. In next one, the body. m1 dot set plain text body. What is the parameter here? Body. Or I can say MSG message. Message that I wanted to pass it to the to address. Fine. Now I have an, whenever we send, we need a to address, CC address if you want, and the subject, what is the subject, and the body that I wanted to send. Okay. Perfect. It is the email building is done. Now what is the next step? Last one is sending an email. Step 4, send an email. Send an email. Because I'm done beautifying everything, adding the to address, EP address, adding the subject, adding the message, everything is done. Now the final thing is that I have to post that. I have to submit the message. So how can I submit? We have a something called messaging dot list of. It has always to be list of messaging dot email. Let's keep the name for this. Let's initialize list of messaging dot email. Now finally sending that email. How do I send? Messaging dot send email. Okay, it is expecting the messaging dot email. Okay, but it does not have any parameters. How do I pass it? So let's add the parameter here. So what is the data that I wanted to pass it? I wanted to pass the M1. Let's assume that you have a multiple messages, like you build multiple like this, which is M2, M3, M4, multiple you have, okay? You have to declare it, but if you have a multiple compose emails, you can always send multiple email messages at the same time, like adding a M2, M3, or whatever the list you have. And it is expecting the list of message.email. Okay, this message.email SE. And SE, what it is referring to? SE is referring to the email that we have composed it. Perfect. Now let's save this. Now let me execute this class. Debug open. EM equal to new EM dot send email apex. What is it is expecting? It is expecting the to address, comma subject, comma message. Anybody has any email address? Can anybody give me the email address? If anybody wants to receive the email, just give me the email. Or let me try this. Swapna for Salesforce@gmail.com. Okay, and then let me add the subject file. This is test email. And next one message sending from Apex email plus. Perfect. Okay. Fine. Now let's go ahead and execute this. No error. I did not see any error. Logs. It says success. Salesforce, image, body, subject. Okay, it seems like it sent the email. Let me cross check. Okay, just a second. Is there any error? So what it does is the address. Okay. and email to address, sending an email message. Perfect. Let me remove the set CC address. Yes. Debug, execute the highlighted one. Is it going to spam email? I do not know. All right, it is going to the spam email. Okay. Okay, that's fine because I have some rule for this Gmail. Okay, so this is the message that I have received. I received 2 times. This is from TTTT1T1, that is the username. So hi, this is test email sending from Apex email class. Right, so I have received it from this user. Because whenever we execute the class from the anonymous, it runs as a user mode. So this email came from that user. Okay, perfect. Any questions on this Apex email? If you want to send more than one email, you can do that. But only the thing is you have to declare it multiple times. Or you can declare a list of, instead of single image, you can declare a list of email. What I mean list of is add the data type here list. Okay, so everything added to this list. Same thing what we have done in the batch class, like we have looked through. We initialize the patient list data type, and then we added everything individual patient, individual record to this collection. So and then finally we did it. So same thing we have to do it with the Apex class also. If you wanted to go with that, use the list. The reason here error it is giving because initially it was a single email message. It was not a list. In list we cannot add like this, right? So that's it. Any other questions from the Apex email?
No, sir.
Quick assignment. Assignment is we have done the Visualforce pages, right? So let's assume that we have a Visualforce page. Assume that this is a Visualforce page. Create a to address page. Okay. Let user enter the to address and ask them to enter the CC address, but it is not a mandatory. And then subject message content. Message content. Okay, so this is a to address and this is a CC address. And let's give the subject here and message content. Put this column width as a 30 by 10, something which you can enter. Okay, then finally here there is a button which says that send email. Send email. Okay, as soon as user click on this button, it has to send an email to this to address and CC address. To address and the CC address. How do you do that? Simple. Like you have to implement a Apex class. You have to implement a Apex class for this, right? And inside this Apex class, you have to declare 4 variables. What are those 4 variables? One is a to address and the C address and the subject and message. For all of this, get set will be there. Set, get. Everybody will have this set, get. Set, get, everybody will have. Okay. Now declare this at the class level, and below that add the same method. Whatever the method we have implemented, add the same thing at the bottom. Here added. But one thing what is changed is don't expect anything from the parameters are not required here because this is coming from Visualforce page. You can directly access here. So the parameters are not required. Here the parameters are not required. So how can you capture this? Put this instead of to address here, put the TD. Put the TD. That's it. TD and here see address and everything should be set. So this is the assignment. Anybody has any questions on the assignment?
No, sir.
Okay. I did save this back to the batch class. Okay. Now the same concept, whatever the concept we have implemented here, I can do same thing in the finish method. Same thing I can do in the finish method. But what are the things that I need is to address details I need. So how can I capture? I always have the access to the patient record. So we have to look through this patient record and send an email. That's it for today class. So today we have covered the extension controller. Okay, there is another assignment. In the extension controller, so let me open the extension controller again. Open resource. Today is 25, 23. Okay. So let's click on preview. So this is what we have done, standard account, and there is a calculation which is a custom logic which we have implemented. Let's assume that there is another custom logic which we want. This is pulling from the account and this is have the custom logic. This we have already implemented using the Apex class. But right now there is a requirement that says that I need another calculation tool. I need another calculation. Okay. So the first one is going to give me the highest number or the largest number. Now here, this calculation is going to give me the smallest number. Now that means I have to implement two Apex classes. I can do in single Apex class also. But but they requested, like they wanted to have a separate Apex classes. In those scenarios, how can we implement? In those scenarios, how can we implement? So here you have a control, you are already calling one Apex class. You can call the another one also. And how many, like there is a no limitation on this, as many as, like based on the requirement, ideally till my experience, maximum 2 classes I got in the extension. Okay, I did not get a requirement to add a 10 classes in the extension or 20 classes in the extension. I did not get it. Max that I have worked is 2 classes that I worked, I included it. Okay, but the limitation is as many as. There is no limitation that you have to add only 2 extensions or 3 extensions or 4 extensions. You can add as many as extensions you want. So today we covered the extension controller and we understood the synchronous process, asynchronous process. We covered the batch Apex, the skeleton structure we understood and we did with one example. And also we did cover the Apex email, how to send the Apex email from Apex. It's like sending an email. So there is an interview question that can come up to write skeleton structure of batch Apex or batch class. And they will ask you to write the code for sending an email. So what are the things you have to write if they are sending an email? 4 steps. First, you have to call the namespace, messaging.single email message. What are the 2 addresses are there? First, put everything into the list and then start composing the email. Where you have to compose the email, single email message. You have to add everything. Use the default set here, set address, set CC address, set PCC address, set subject, set text, plain text body. Anything you wanted to add it in a single email message, everything you have to start with the set method. And then finally we have something called messaging.email, because while sending an email, it expects the messaging.email. So that you have to add. And then coming to the email, just a second. Coming to the email limitations. So if you are working in a developer edition, you have maximum of 10 emails you can send. But in real time, if you are sending a mass email, the maximum is 5,000 per day. And this is also depending on license of your org. So maximum emails we can send 5,000 per day. Okay. On top of this, there is another corner limits. For example, if you are sending emails to the internal users, but who is the internal users? The users already registered in the Salesforce. That means you have a record in the user. If you are sending an email to the users, we have an object called users, right? Anybody who are in this users list, that means it's an internal user. Any user, if you are sending to the internal users, if you are sending email to the internal users, there is a unlimited. There is no limit on that. You can send as many as emails to the internal users. There is no limit on that. But if you are sending an email to the external address, then per day it is a 5,000. And one more thing, from the Visualforce page, it's not good to send the mass email. Mass email means 10 emails together, 20 emails together. It's not a good practice. And that is not accepted by the Salesforce. You can send one email or two email, we can send it. But if you wanted to do with the max of mass email, you cannot do that. So this 5,000 per day is only for external users. External users.
So this 5,000 emails for which edition, Swapna?
Sorry?
Which edition we can use 5,000 emails per day?
Yes. If you are sending an email for internal users, there is no count for that.
No. So we have a different editions, right? Developer org, enterprise org. We have a different, right? Based on the license, we can increase the emails.
Send email from the Apex. Yeah, you're right. From the Apex, if you are sending an email, and this is also based on the license. That's what I have mentioned. If it is an enterprise, there is a different license. So based on the license also, it will be depending on. So right now I'm saying 5,000, that is just to remember it, but it is also equal to the your license also. If you go to your org, let's say, company information, here you will see the user license, okay? And let's say that here, permission set user based entitlement. In developer edition, we do not have. Go to the list 23. So go to your company information for your organization and cross verify there. You might see.
Okay, Swapna. Thank you.
See, it is explaining the total license, how many licenses are got for this dev work and how many used and what are the limiting, and there is also expiration date will be there. And there is also partner license. Depending on the partner license, you might get a huge on top of that. Yeah, that's all based on the org license. Okay, but if you do not remember your org license and multiplication of that limitage, then by default you can say that 5,000 per day. By default. Any other questions?
Yeah, hi Sapna. I have one question regarding the batch class. So for the batch class, the chunk size, the maximum chunk size is 2000. Mm,
I cannot hear your voice clearly.
Yeah. Actually, I'm talking about like the chunk size. We can give the maximum chunk size 2000, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah. So if we are giving them 3000, then what will happen? Like the error, and it will throw an error, or it will process the 2000 records. What will happen? I need to.
It will throw an error. See, I remember I had worked with this kind of a scenario in my, I can say in my previous company. Okay, so there is something, 7 lakh records are there. Okay, somebody has written the batch class to update some data. Okay, they started today 12 o'clock. They started and it's keep on running. Like they started yesterday 12 o'clock. Okay, today till evening it was keep on running. And at the end, what happened? Everything rolled back, and the final result is error. Because you are occupying the entire space. 2000 means it's a huge. You are blocking everybody, and at the same time, there were another process which is supposed to run. It did not run, and there was an escalation from the client side also why this batch class was not executed. Because you are blocking everything. You see, these kind of scenarios are very tricky to say that, because if you are and that time we raised a ticket for Salesforce support also. So they said that your processing time or internet is bit slow, so that is the reason it is taking a lot of time, or some reason they were saying that. But ultimately, if you give the 2000 record, whether your internet fast or slow, keep that aside. But if you have a logic to execute, like you have a business logic to update a account, user, contact. If this kind of a logic is there, which is taking at least 2 to 3 minutes for one record to update it, assume that you are blocking it entirely. See, it's going to give an error definitely if you have a long business logic. But if it is a simple, straightforward logic, just like right now, whatever we have written, update the last name equal to batch apex, it might run quickly. But if you have a long batch class execution there, in real time, anyway, we will not write this simple, straightforward. It will be like a 29, 30 lines of business logic, we will write it.
Okay, Swapna. Okay. So we will cover the stateful kind of thing in the next topic, I guess, for the batch classes.
Yes.
Okay.
Stateful will talk about next. Remind me starting up the class, because today I forgot to cover the extension controller. I totally skipped that.
Yeah, for the batch class, I guess a few things are left, like the web call out things and these kind of things are still there.
That is another topic, call out. Okay. Call out,
Okay.
integrate are a different. Because when the people go on the call out calling, that means they are very good in the Apex, writing the Apex classes. Then only we can understand call out calling. First of all, we have to be very good in writing the Apex classes, and couple of things, how to call the external system and internal system, or how to pass the data to the external system. If we are clear on that, then call out calling can be understood by anybody. But we have a different audience, right?
So if we pass the chunk size 3000, then it will throw an error. Nothing will happen. Like it will not process the 2000 record and rest. So it will throw an error directly.
See, I would suggest try it, because I faced the error. Maybe my logic was very huge. The logic that we have written in the batch class was a huge class. Okay, on top of that, we were having the installed package. Okay, installed package was also doing some updates there. So it took a long time, but if you want, you can try that.
Yeah. I will do that. Okay.
See, Salesforce is nothing but only not a Salesforce, right? On top of it, we have an installed package, a managed package, unmanaged package, everything will be there in the real time. So yeah. Okay then. Any other questions?
No, Swapna. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you everyone. Happy weekend. Bye bye. We'll meet
Thank
on
you.
Monday.
Thank you so much.